personal narrative of a visit to Ghuzni, Kabul and Afghanistan. G.T. Vigne's A Personal Narrative of a Visit to Ghuzni, Kabul and Afghanistan is a classic 19th century travelogue detailing his 1830s journeys through the region, offering first-hand accounts of Ghuzni's ancient ruins like Mahmud's tomb, the court of Dost Muhammad Khan in Kabul, encounters with figures like Ranjit Singh, and observations on local culture, politics, and the nascent Russian threat, serving as a vital historical record of pre-colonial Afghanistan. Key aspects of Vigne's narrative: exploration, description. Vigne, an English traveller, describes the landscapes, cities, and people of Afghanistan, focusing on historical sites and daily life. Ghuzni. He famously explored the ruins of Ghuzni, particularly the tomb of Mahmud of Ghuzni, documenting its historical significance. Kabul, Dost Muhammad. A significant portion details his residence at the court of Emir Dost Muhammad Khan in Kabul, providing insights into Afghan politics and society. Historical context. His work covers the complex political situation, including the Sikh Empire under Ranjit Singh and growing Russian influence relevant to the Great Game. Illustrations. The original book included illustrations from drawings Vigne made on the spot, adding visual depth. Significance. It's a valuable primary source for understanding 19th century Afghanistan before major European interventions. It reveals Vigne's detailed observations on local customs, geography, and historical monuments. Chapter 1. Prepare to depart for Multan Guja Singh Fate Champetre, the Lodiana School, Shah Shuja and Shah Zaman Cross, the Sutlej altars of Alexander description of the Punjab, country gardens of Multan Shrine of the Fakir, Shums, Tabriz, heat of climate description of Multan Musulman tombs, manufactures of Multan Saran Mul, the Besak, Amir Khan, the river Tinmu, proceed to Karur, huts of the villages, cross the Sindh ferries over the Indus, arrival at Purawur Tufan. After returning to Lodiana from my first visit to Kashmir and Little Tibet in 1835, I formed a design of visiting Kabul. The direct route would have been through Lahore and Peshawar, but my principal reason for not taking that road was that I had been wandering in Kashmir, Little Tibet, and the Maharaja Ranjit Singh's territories for the best part of the year. I had been considered and treated as his guest, and had taken leave of him in his capital but a month or two before. On the 12th of March 1836, I quitted the hospitable roof of my friend Captain, now Sir Claude Martin, Wade, and left Lodiana for Multan, intending to proceed thence through the Sulimani mountains to Kabul in company with the Lohani Kafilas, or caravans, after having delayed my departure for a few days in order to be present at the return of the mission which Ranjit Singh had sent to Calcutta, with presents for the King and Governor-General. Lala Govind Jas, a confidential servant of the Maharaja, was its chief. Guja Singh, the second in importance, was a well-looking and intelligent young dandy, often wearing the splendid yellow dress of the Sikhs, and sometimes the full uniform of a British general officer. He had a great turn for mechanics, and exhibited a theodolite of his own making, and a model of the steam engine made for him by Mr. Prinsep of Calcutta. He affected to say, at least so I was informed, that he had seen little that was new there, excepting the ships of war which he allowed were wonderful. But it was too evident that he well knew he had only to recross the Sutlej to astonish his inquiring countrymen, and, when discoursing on his favourite topic, mechanics, the energy of his manner and his animated conversation was certainly not the offspring of Oriental indifference. About 2 years ago at Amritsar, he fell from a window into the street when intoxicated and was killed. It would seem that he was desperately bent upon procuring an English wife. He fell in love with a lady at Calcutta, and was, it is said, prevented from marrying her only because it became known that he had already 2 or 3 wives in the Punjab. He wished to have remained there altogether, but Ranjit sent down a request that nothing of the kind should be allowed, and even went so far as to desire that he should be put under arrest if he persisted in the latter determination. On his return, he commenced, without knowing 1 syllable of English, a serious flirtation in the language of the eyes, which seems to be the same all over the world, with some lady at Delhi. Before I started, I was present at a fête champêtre given by Captain Wade upon the occasion of the arrival of the mission. There was native dancing, singing and sword-playing. All the beauty and fashion of Ludhiana were assembled to see the fireworks and illuminations. Characters from all quarters beyond the Sutlej were also present. Magnificent Sikhs, scheming Kashmirians, pensioned Afghans, and supplicant envoys from Great and Little Tibet. The next morning, there was an examination of the boys of the Ludhiana school, conducted by the Reverend Messrs. Wilson and Newton, the American missionaries, who deserve the greatest credit, and something more, for their voluntary superintendence and its results. To say nothing of the surprising answers given by the students, particularly to geographical questions, the examination was well worth attending, if it were merely to see the motley assemblage of which the school was composed. The first in rank was the young Nawab Abdul Gayas Khan, nephew of Dost Muhammad Khan of Kabul. Next to him came 3 or 4 young Sikhs of an ennobled family. Amongst them was Bisan Singh, a nephew of Kushal Singh, Ranjit Singh's chief jemadar, or captain as he is called, par excellence, and also a son of Kisan Chund, the Sikh vakil, or envoy resident at Ludhiana. The rest of the school was composed of rising young munshis and babus of great promise. After reading a passage in English, the boys were required to translate it carefully into Hindustani, and this was usually done with great correctness and very little hesitation. Upon my return to Ludhiana this year, I found that the school existed no more. The parents of the boys, Muslim and Hindus, had become alarmed at the enforced observance of Christian religious exercises, and withdrew their children from the school altogether. Baron Hugel, with whom I had travelled from Kashmir, and myself, were introduced by Captain Wade to Shah Shuja and Shah Zaman, the pensioned ex-kings of the country I was going to visit. We found Shah Shuja sitting on a chair in a recess, or rather doorway, of his house, with a vista, formed by 2 rows of attendants that diverged from it as from a centre. He appeared to be a man aged about 50, of the middle size, good-natured, and port wine complexioned, looking more like a gentleman who had lost an estate than a monarch who had lost his kingdom. He wore a dark-coloured robe, a white turban, and white cotton gloves. Baron Hugel had been received with great distinction by Ranjit Singh. I had come in for a share of it. Every application which the Shah made to the government went through Captain Wade. And yet he allowed neither of us a chair, but kept us standing the whole time. His brother, Shah Zaman, resided in a different part of the building. We went to see him also. We stood. He sat on the ground, pale, thin, dejected, and counting his beads. He asked much about Kashmir, and said that the shawls were not now so fine as they used to be. I remember, he said, when the finer fabric could be drawn through a ring. He was praising the beauty of Kashmir. Yes, remarked the poor blind monarch, Kashmir is certainly beautiful, and the air and water are good, but, he continued, with a melancholy shake of the head, and a sigh as deep as I ever heard, Kabul, Kabul, what is Kashmir to Kabul, and I shall never see it again. We were surprised to hear from Captain Wade that in spite of their common misfortunes and fate, the 2 brothers were not on the best terms with each other. The next morning, Shah Shuja sent us several trays containing the best display of native cookery that I had seen in the East. It had probably been superintended in management by the ladies of the Haram. I think Ludhiana the most interesting station in India, and that Captain Wade held the most important appointment as political agent to the Sikhs. After a night's dark, or journey in a palanquin, I found myself at the village of Dhermkota and my horse in waiting for me. 2 days' ride over a flat and fertile country brought me to Firozpur, a place only remarkable for the lofty walls of its fort, which, in the distance, appeared to rise from the plain like a thick and regular clump of trees. Since the late meeting of Lord Auckland and Ranjit Singh, it has been put in a state of repair, and a new cantonment has been formed there, as being the nearest place to Sikh capital, Lahore. Thither too, in case of need, the British cavalry and horse artillery could arrive in a few hours after crossing the river. The next day I was ferried across the Sutlej after an hour's ride from the town. The river here is somewhat more than 200 yards in width from the Punjab side, and it was then so shallow that the ferryman jumped into the water to assist in dragging the boat ashore. The banks all around were flat, sandy, and uninteresting. On the same day I arrived at Gullah, about 7 miles in the interior, and from thence passed through Pakpatan, a considerable village built on a mound, rising alone from a perfect flat. The last place mentioned by Arrian and Quintus Curtius, in their account of Alexander's march towards the Sutlej, is Sangala. Mr. Masson, who had visited the ruins of Harapur, or the Green City, a few hours' march from the eastern bank of the Ravi, assured me that he felt quite convinced of this having been the site of Sangala, and that a hill and a lake and other localities mentioned in the description of Alexander's victory over the Kathai were then existing in such a relative position to each other as to correspond exactly with the account given of Sangala by those authors. It may be inferred from what follows that Alexander went thence directly towards the Sutlej and built his celebrated altars. Pakpatan lies exactly east of Harapur, but Alexander was surely too anxious about his glory to have built his altars on the plains of India, where they would be washed away by the river, which is constantly changing its course. Otherwise I should have been very much inclined, with all deference, to have placed them at Pakpatan. The name signifies, literally, the clean ferry, whence we should imagine that the river once flowed close to it. It is now a few miles from the Sutlej, and the country is covered with a low jungle, but the lofty mound on which the village has gradually risen cannot but suggest the idea of a substratum of ruins, and the place derived an interest in my eyes upon the mere possibility of what those ruins might be. I think it probable that Alexander would rather have followed up the course of the Sutlej for the purpose of building his altars upon the solid rock of the Himalaya. I believe that the trench and ruins first visited by Mr. Moorcroft upon the Secunda, the Dar, or Hill of Alexander near the Mude country, are the remains of his celebrated altars. Place and probability are well in accordance with this opinion, but I shall reserve a more lengthened dissertation on the subject and on the position of the rock of Iomos until I treat of my journeys to Kashmir and Tibet. My next stations were Tibi, Lukhoki, Luka, Suldera, Tiba, and Mukdam Ram. 6 miles beyond the latter place, the domes of Multan were visible over the jungle. I arrived there on the 6th of April, after a very uninteresting march, though without accident or robbery. Thanks to Captain Wade and Kisan Chund, Ranjit Singh's vakil at Ludhiana, I had been furnished with a sufficient guard. There was a perfect flat or plain throughout the whole distance. Much was in cultivation, but more was jungle, composed principally of a prickly mimosa, tamarisk, and Bayer apple, or jujube, growing in isolated bushes on a hard and sun-glazed soil. Where there was cultivation, the Persian wells were seen and heard constantly at work for the purposes of irrigation. The crops, chiefly of wheat and barley, were everywhere green and looking remarkably well. Those in the Punjab were, I think, the finest. The wheat, in particular, which grew here, had no stunted stalk and was often as high and as fine-looking as I have ever seen it in Europe, but the Lahore wheat has always been celebrated. In the jungle were antelopes, hares, and black and grey partridges, franc-col xulins, in great abundance. Tigers are to be found in some parts of the jungle and on the banks of the river. I did not hear of any lions, but I have known small ones to be bayoneted by Ranjit Singh's hunting sepahis within 2 days' march of Lahore, and have seen their skins. Upon my arrival at Multan, I was domiciled in a baraderi, 12 doors, or summer house in the Bagi Begi, made by the Nawab Surfuras Khan about 30 years ago. It was cool, well shaded with orange trees, and laid out in the usual manner with reservoirs and fountains. The walks, intersecting each other at right angles, were raised above the parterres and flower beds, that they might be dry when the latter are covered with water. There are numerous gardens in the environs of Multan, often formed around the shrine of some Mussulman fakir, and no man will quarrel with the fanaticism which has procured him shade and shelter in the climate of India. In the Hazar-e-Bagh, or the Garden of the Presence, on the north side of the fort, I saw a large tree, the Maul Siri, grown, as they told me, from a cutting which was originally brought from Mecca, but I do not vouch for the truth of the story. The principal shrine is that of the Fakir Shams-e-Tabriz. Shams signifies the sun in Persia. This holy man, they say, poor and wretched, made his appearance in the bazaar at Multan, and going to a tabaki or cook shop, requested permission to dress his dinner, which was rudely denied him. A similar request was made to another, and was met by a similar rebuff. The fakir, proud and indignant, called upon the sun to descend from heaven. The obedient luminary appeared in the air above the bazaar, and he cooked his dinner in its rays. The scorched and exhausted inhabitants of Multan crawled to him in terror and implored him to send the sun on high again, a request with which he at length thought proper to comply. Sir J. Malcolm, in his History of Persia, affirms that Shams-e-Tabriz was a great man of the sect of the Sufis, or Oriental philosophers, or free thinkers. They believe in one God and the doctrine of predestination, and generally deny the existence of future rewards and punishments, believing the soul after death to be reabsorbed into the divine essence. Some of this sect affirm that Christ was a Sufi. After this, it is not surprising that Multan should be found notoriously hot. It is further a very dry place, although nearly within the full influence of the tropical rains of India, and it was singular that scarcely any had fallen for 2 years lately. I was, however, fortunate in the weather, which was cooled by repeated showers, so that the thermometer averaged only 76 degrees in the shade for the 10 days between the 6th and 16th of April that I was there. Multan, supposed to be the capital of the Mali of Alexander's historians, is a dusty and slovenly-looking city containing about 45,000 inhabitants. The streets are narrow and the houses are 2, 3, and 4 stories high, flat-roofed of course, and built of sunburnt brick, with a washing of mud over them. The city wall, about 35 feet high, is of the same material but in a decayed state. Around Multan, in various directions, are numerous hollow ways of no depth, connected by a short cut or hole through the bank when necessary. In the hot weather, these are filled by means of a deep canal which communicates with the river Chenab. The fort was built by Burhan Bey, the son of the Emperor Jahan Guira, upon a mound that rises in the north part of the city, of which it occupies a considerable portion. The city is about 3 miles in circumference. There are 4 gates, one of which is closed up by the order of the Maharaja Ranjit Singh. The walls of the fort, which in some places are 60 feet in height, with bastions at intervals of about 70 yards, are in good repair, but mounted with a total of only 6 or 7 ill-cast native guns. They have been surrounded by a ditch, in many places entirely destroyed. In the interior of the fort is the shrine of Mir Singh Pure, a Hindu saint, and 2 lofty and spacious buildings erected over the tombs of two Muslim saints of great celebrity, Ba-ul-Haq and Shah Alam. The ground plan of one is an octagon, with a diagonal of about 18 yards and buttresses at the angles. The lower part of the building is surmounted with another octagon and a dome rising to the height of 100 feet. The whole of the outside is tastefully ornamented with coloured tiles, chiefly blue, in imitation of those of China. They were originally used in ornamenting the public buildings of Multan and were made there, but there is now no other manufactory of them nearer than Delhi. Ranjit Singh's cannon appear to have told with great effect upon the roofs of the principal mosques. Most of the buildings of the fort were destroyed after the capture of the city, with the exception of these shrines and the house of Mazufar Khan, which stands on the most elevated part of it and commands an extensive view. This brave man, the last independent Nawab of Multan, lies buried in the vestibule of Ba-ul-Haq. For 12 years he resolutely opposed the inroads of the Sikhs, but the fort was at last taken in the year 1818 by Kuruk Singh, the only son of Ranjit and present ruler of the Punjab. Mazufar Khan fought in person at the Kedari gate of the fort and at last fell mortally wounded after a desperate resistance. When Ranjit Singh visited his tomb afterwards, he is reported to have made a speech somewhat of the same nature with that uttered by Napoleon at the tomb of Frederick of Prussia. Multan is famous for its silk manufactures. I visited the house of a weaver. It presented a very different appearance from the atelier of a shawl maker in Kashmir. There I have seen 20 men at work in one room. Here there are seldom more than 3 who sit in a hollow in the ground, by which means their hands are brought down even with the tani or woof, which is extended near the floor and fastened to a post not more than a foot in height. This apparatus takes up a great deal of room, whereas the frame of the shawl worker, which is perpendicular, does not occupy a space of more than 6 square yards. 700 maunds of raw silk are brought to Multan every year by the Lohanis, chiefly from Bokhara and Turkestan. These are manufactured in 150 workshops. One man will finish an ordinary kaish or piece of silk in 6 days, perhaps 3 yards long and a foot and a half wide, taking 8 days previously for the arrangement of the weaving apparatus. A very handsome kaish is finished in 16 days. That of the red colour is most valuable. It is dyed with cochineal, which is brought from either Bombay or Bokhara. That from Bombay is 1 rupee a seer, about a shilling a pound. Multan is also famous for its carpets and embroidery. There are from 1,000 to 1,500 maunds of tobacco produced around Multan annually. The best, which is called suruk, or the red, is sold for 6 annas, equal to about 9 pence. Inferior kinds are sold from 4 to 2 annas a seer. I exchanged visits with Saran Mul, the governor of Multan. Ranjit Singh has been heard to say that he was one of the best officers in his service. Whilst I was at Multan, he sent me a kilat, or dress of honour, together with an elephant and a couple of horses for my use, as an especial mark of his favour. He is a thin man with a good-tempered and, for a native, a superior expression of countenance, and is said to have distinguished himself at the taking of the city. His government was well spoken of by the Lohani merchants, who gave him an excellent character for justice in his dealings with them. He is the arch-opponent of the minister Raja Dihan Singh and his brothers Gulab and Suchait Singh, whose influence at the court of Ranjit is usually all-powerful. On the 11th of April, the Basak, a Hindu festival, took place in the morning. I rode to the river, about 3 miles distant. The country which intervenes between the city and its banks was looking very green and picturesque, considering it is entirely flat. A great deal of land was under cultivation and bearing very fine crops of wheat. Well-planted gardens were always in sight, and date and palm trees standing singly or in groups were frequently seen amongst the numerous topes or clumps of mulberry, mango, banyan, peepul, and acacia trees. By the roadside were the vendors of wreaths and fans made from the flags that grew on the water's edge. In the afternoon there was a fair in the Bagh Ali Akbar, a garden with a shrine of a fakir of that name. I saw the Multanis returning. Every species of conveyance had of course been put in requisition. Horses, mules, donkeys carrying 1 or 2 persons, camels, each bearing 7 or 8 women and children, disposed on either side in trucks and unlicensed bullock carts, with cargoes of giggling, dancing girls. The number of persons who will stow themselves in these vehicles is quite astounding. All were in their holiday dresses. The Hindu was to be distinguished by his caste mark on his forehead, his rose-coloured turban, and red flowing trousers. The Multan Mussulman usually wore a white dress of the same kind of pattern. The Sikh, generally a Sipahi, was recognised by his sword, matchlock and accoutrements, his scanty turban, his earrings, his would-be knee breeches, or his close-fitting ill-made trousers. The Lohanis, my future fellow travellers, were conspicuous by reason of the snake-like folds of their turban and by their dark, swarthy and manly features beneath them. Ferishta says that Multan was 3 or 4 times chastised by Mahmud of Ghuzni for revolt, and that he marched thence across the desert in his way to Gujarat and Somnath. I quitted Multan the 17th of April in company with Amir Khan, a Lohani of the highest rank, who had one of the noblest countenances I ever beheld. I was introduced to him at Ludhiana by Captain Wade. We were ferried over the river at the Rajat in a large and clumsy but useful boat. The Teenmu, 3 months, for so the stream is called, is formed by an union of the Chenab, the Jhelum, and the Ravi, the 2 first forming a junction with each other about 40 miles above Ahmedpur, receiving the Ravi at that place, which is, I believe, also about the same distance from Multan. The Teenmu is hardly a third part of the stream of the Indus, and yet at Multan it is half a mile in width. Though much indebted to its sands and islands for this expanse, it is certainly a very large body of water. The main stream running beneath the right bank, with a depth of about 5 or 6 yards. After a fine morning's march over a flat and desert country, with little shade and very bad water, I arrived at Laga, a small but neat-looking town built of mud and brick and nearly equidistant from Dera Ghazi Khan and Dera Ismail Khan. For 20 miles previously, I had a distant view of the Sulimani mountains on the opposite side of the Indus, running apparently from the northwest to the southeast. The weather was hazy, and I could distinguish little besides a low-waved outline. At Laga, I saw the sun set directly behind the Kaiser or Tukhti Suliman mountain, distant about 60 miles. I here learned that the Maharaja had marched 10,000 men, under the command of Raja Suchet Singh, into the mountain district of Bunu, lying to the north of Karabagh. My next stage was Karur. At a village called Radal, I accidentally noticed a zwanjera tree producing a red gum called, I think, cheer. It was common, I was told, at Multan, but not in India. Karur resembles Laga, but is smaller. It stands on the edge of a plain, covered with the tufts of the gigantic grass, of which the huts throughout this country are made. They look like huge half-barrels of straw. Hooped with cables of the same material, the district is not destitute of villages. In the jungle, I nearly run foul of a cobra whose motionless head was raised above the bush in which his body was concealed, and bore so much resemblance to a dead branch that I did not perceive what it was until I was close upon him. On both sides of the river we passed a tamarisk jungle, swarming with wild boars. The ground was hard and dry at this season, but in June, when the river is swollen by the rains that fall in the mountains, it causes such a flood that a boat can be piloted from Karur for 15 miles to a village on the opposite side and parallel with the banks for a much greater distance. I was first ferried over a small branch of the Zinde, about 100 yards in width and 7 feet in depth. We then rowed for nearly a mile over an island of sand and arrived at the Kiari, or Putagat, where there is a ferry over the main stream. A grass hut, erected by the ferryman, afforded a shelter from the heat. The thermometer stood at 100 degrees in the sun by the boiling scale, and I should estimate the elevation at about 800 feet. The Sinde, Indus, or Attock, is here about 3/4 of a mile in width, deep, and not very muddy, containing, I should think, at least half as much water again as any other stream of the Punjab, running at the rate of nearly 3 miles an hour. The name Attock is derived from Atkana or Atukna, signifying in Hindustani to stop. No pious Hindu will venture to go beyond it of his own accord for fear of losing caste. From the mountains downward to the junction at Mittenkote, it is called the Sinde or Abu Sin, the Father River. There is upon record an account of a Hindu or Sikh force that chased a party of Muslims across the Indus, but refused to follow up their success by crossing it themselves. I regret that I did not make a note of the circumstance when it was related to me, but it may be known to many of my Oriental readers. Such is the wonderful attachment to the British uniform, which they are proud of wearing, that in the late expedition to Afghanistan, the native Sipahis, many of them Rajputs, cheered loudly when they saw the British flag flying at Bucca and passed the bridge over the Indus with enthusiasm. Replete with interest from the mountains of Upper Tibet and Karakoram to its junction with the ocean at Karachi, this vast stream appears to roll over rather than through the naked sand of the plains, and where without it there would be neither barrier nor boundary. It wanders from the northern to the southern horizon, as if unconscious of its own importance as a line of demarcation, or as a Rubicon alike, to the native and the invader of Hindustan. The Tukti Suliman, or Kaiser Mountain, bore north-northwest of the ferry, distant about 40 miles. There are 4 large ghats or ferries between the Putla Ghat and 7 to the south between it and Dera Ghazi Khan. The river varies in width near Karabaga, and it narrows between the hills to about 160 yards with a tranquil stream. Half a dozen strong, large, and useful boats, built of the deodar or hill cedar, fastened with iron clamps and ornamented with carving, ply at this ferry, which is the richest of all. I was told that the ferryman received about 2,500 rupees for passage money annually. The Lohanis from Calcutta, Delhi, Jaipur, all take this route to their rendezvous at Dehradun. A duty of 5% was first levied upon their merchandise at Multan, the same that was paid in the time of Mazufar Khan. Another tax of 1 rupee, 6 annas, a mund, is levied at Laga on behalf of the Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and another of 6 annas was then paid to Muhammad Khan, the Nawab of Dera Ismail Khan. After crossing the main stream of the Attock, I found myself on another island, covered with the dwarf tamarisk. I forded the thin, shallow stream on the other side of it and arrived at Purawur. I observed the boys of the village playing a regular English game of peg-top. The pegs were of wood. The Tukht-i-Suliman Mountains bore northwest of Purawur. A furious tufan passed over me at this place and rendered the air deliciously cool for a day or two afterwards. These sudden storms are common throughout India in the spring. For an hour before sunset, clouds are gathered in the western horizon, which is illuminated with repeated flashes of lightning, accompanied with a continued muttering of distant thunder, the atmosphere becoming oppressively sultry. Suddenly the heavens are furiously agitated, a brightening space is seen on the horizon, and the clouds appear, rapidly diverging from it as from a center. A few large drops of rain are dashed downwards with great violence. The whirlwind rises almost instantly and blows as if it blew its last, with a violence to which Europe is a stranger. The rain then falls as if a deluge were commencing. Sudden and terrific crashes of thunder are heard above and around, and hailstones, such as we have read of, are often precipitated with most injurious effect. The violence of the Tufan is generally exhausted in about half an hour.